Facebook's expanding its local foothold with plans to triple its workforce. The company has a local office in Cambridge near Kendall Square, but it's reaching out across the river, especially in collaborations with Bunker Hill and Roxbury community colleges. Another form of outreach is an exhibit by Facebook Boston's Artist in Residence program, opening as part of this year's Art Week celebration. Our guest is one of the artists in residence we'd like to welcome, Ethan Morrow. Thank you very much for being with us, Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, if people say art and Facebook, how does that go together? And what did that mean for you as an assignment?
Well, it's definitely a difficult assignment. I mean, the company has a large a stature in the world, and it's a conflicted one for many people. And so, but it's also a really exciting part of what they are able to do. They're a multifaceted company, and they have this incredible program where they have invited contemporary artists from around the world. It's always local, so if they open an office in Hong Kong, they contact artists from the region to work on that project. But they have this commitment to contemporary art, and they really have found a way to kind of invigorate their offices through these installation projects. And I think it's a credit to them that with all the other things they have going on, they've really sustained this over many, many years. And it's really cool for those of us who are able to participate in it to have a chance to figure out, how do you build contemporary art for an active workspace like that, where the employees are interested in it, challenged by it, excited by it, those kinds of things.
In some way, this exhibit is about artists and maybe Facebook itself sort of tuning into Boston in some way. What did you channel from Boston?
Well, I was lucky in that I also had done a project with them earlier in their smaller office, so I knew some of the employees, and I knew that they had an interest in connecting with some of the history of innovation and research and study in the Cambridge area, in Boston more generally, but in Kendall Square specifically. And so I decided to build a project that talked about facets that were semi-local. So my project involves this massive sturgeon fish, which is kind of part robot, part native fish. And the sturgeon, used to be in the Charles, and there's been some possible sightings of them coming back. And I did some things like that where my goal was to try and link the project to things that were local. And I think a lot of the artists who were there tried to find those sorts of avenues, whether something geographic, something material related in their content and concept. But it's a cool thing to have a piece that's on site in a space like that, where people they have a commitment to that neighborhood, and they want to find a way to try and build links in that way. So that was a good challenge for us. I
think some of our viewers might be interested in hearing the medium for that sturgeon. What did you use to picture that?
I used, thanks to a local artist, Jamal Thorne, who I've worked with on some projects, who has a great show at Kingston Gallery that's up right now. He had recommended that I try these paint pens, which are basically refillable pens used by graffiti artists, mural artists all over the world. And that you can load anything into them. So great non-toxic art supply, very cheap to purchase and flexible, and you can work really quickly with it.
In some of your works, as a common denominator, I see elements of one thing transposed into a different context. It could be St. Paul's Cathedral on an aircraft carrier, or some of those waves from Hokusai in a different context. Why does that interest you?
I've always been intrigued by story and narrative, and a lot of my work has an element of folktale, historical fiction. I've often repurposed historical narratives in my work, and so I'm looking for something that's has a sensibility to it that people can find, where they may see something within the narrative or the tale or the scene that I'm creating that has a quality of the known, a quality where they're finding something reasonable, perhaps even within it. Logical, rational, etc. And then I want to corrupt that a little bit by slamming it up, mashing it up with things that start to tell a story that is also perhaps a little bit absurd, that is crumbling, that starts to abstract and kind of fall apart. And part of that is I'm always trying to talk about the ways in which humanity, we believe we're so stable and certain and logical, but in reality things are always starting to crumble a little bit. So I've used things like the mashup or forms of collage to try and talk about that breaking apart.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Ethan Murrow, artist in residence with Facebook Boston. Ethan, talk about the space there, because when I saw one photograph of your work in that space, I'm thinking, oh, this is sort of like a hallway at MIT. I mean, how did you feel about working in a space like that?
Well, the project happened quite quickly. So many of us who, there's a lot of artists who worked on this particular project, all with different installations. And many of us only saw the site immediately before we started, so a week or two before. We had been through proposal stages, and we kind of had a sense of the scale of things and some of the options for where we might be, but we hadn't necessarily seen the particulars of the site, all the wiring, the way the shapes and sort of tonality of the space. And I walked in, and my particular space, it's beautiful. It's big, long hallway, but it is a hallway. It's an active hallway, a busy hallway right near the stairs and the elevator. And it was initially very intimidating to think about how I could structure a piece that would both kind of compete and cohere with that space in a way. And I mean compete in that a way where it would help to define the space. And so that was a great challenge. I used big, bold patterns to try and accommodate some of the busyness of the space. And a real kind of a great part of the project was that the construction crews were still there. So the painters and the electricians and stuff like that were coming by and commenting on the work and giving us tips and teasing us. And we had a really good rapport going with all of them. So that was really fun. And that was actually quite helpful for getting some kind of off-the-cuff commentary on what we were doing. But I really love trying to figure out how to structure a piece within a specific space or architecture. It's a sort of a compositional problem for the most part when you come down to it. And if you can figure out a way to span things like doorways, electrical signage, things like that, it's very satisfying to determine a way in which you can connect a whole space together.
I know it could even pass for a minimalist gallery space somewhere, but on the other hand, this is a place where people work. They're not just going to park in front of something and contemplate it for 15 minutes.
Right.
How do you relate to the kind of human traffic that you got there?
Yeah, well, in my previous project with Facebook, I actually had the unique experience of building the wall drawing I did at that time while the engineers were working right next to me. And that was a real privilege because they told me over many, many days what they were seeing in the work. And I really got to know them very well. And that was a luxury, something I hadn't had before in a project. And for this project, I don't know the employees that are there because they hadn't moved in yet when we were working on it. But I think, part of what I am always trying to do, I don't want to just please them. We're not there to purely entertain or please, but I do want to give them something that they value. So even if they're perhaps sometimes puzzled by it or curious about it, or even tense around it at first, I want to give them something that delivers over time. So I often will, in those kinds of settings, I'll try and build something that's a bit of a visual puzzle. It's not something that you can solve immediately, but something that maybe over days, weeks, hopefully even months, the employees that are there will start to see new things in it. And that's just part of that's my premise, whether right or wrong, that they're the ones who have to, in the end, live with this thing. And I want it to be something that they can invest in, whether through arguing about it or having some sort of affection for it, whatever that might be. And hopefully by sort of building a discoverable piece that they have to decipher over time, that might deliver something for them.
I know you also have something up at the ICA in the waterfront. And in the meantime, if people want to see this Gala exhibit at Facebook, is there some way they can check that out?
I actually don't have a good answer for you about that. I think that there are ways in which the public can go in, although it being a technology company, I know they're also careful about their privacy and the work that they're doing. But I would suggest that if people are interested, they contact the office there, and I think they are going to try and have some sort of like tours or openings from time to time so that people can enjoy the work.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Ethan Murrow, artist in residence from Facebook Boston.